Wasting money on cures. Forgot how to fix myself. They say that time is free. Then why is it so precious? Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. Time is running out. Time is running out. Lately I've lost my track. I've sailed the deeper seas, hoping to find something to bring back better times. Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. But time is running out. 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 Time is running. Time is running out. But time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can be over. They can't be over now. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over now. Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Welcome to the second of a double header today. We did a session on environmental economics about an hour or so ago, and we're heading into a session now on labour market. Some people say the labour market is the most important market in the economy, and they could well be right. It's one of those markets that bridges both micro and macro. And our focus today will be on the UK labour market. We've got some interesting topics for you. Before we do have a go at the start of the session, quick reminder that next week we hit the road. We are on our Grade Booster tour, visiting Newcastle, Leeds, Manchester, Bristol, Birmingham, and then we have a 2-week gig in London, at the View Westfield White City and View Westfield Stratford. And we love the Grade Booster tours. We love having our intensive days revision. Different subjects ranging from biology to geography, psychology, sociology, business, economics, obviously, politics, and much more besides. So if you are interested in a full day's revision with us, then just go to tutor2u.net and select the live events section, and you can find some details of how to grab a ticket. So Grade Booster kicks off. Jim and Graham are pictured there, bottom middle, and they are outstanding with business. Absolutely fantastic day if you want to come along. Let's make a start. As always, I've got some charts for you. We played a little game at the start of our session. I'll give you a chart, but sneakily, I have taken off information. So the heading normally, and also the y-axis. Here's the first one. And the challenge with the group is, can you identify the chart correctly? So here we go. Alex says, the labour market is one of my weaker points. I'm excited for this session. Well, Alex, hopefully by the end it'll be a strong point, and I'm super excited for this session. What do you think here? What have we got here? Is it the unemployment rate? By the way, this is for the UK. The UK. Football fan enthusiast says trade union participation in the UK. Those figures kind of make sense, actually. Rafiki says the employment rate. I hope it's not employment rate, the 15%. Ben Gom says level of unemployment. No, because it's a percentage. So with the unemployment rate. Kamara says immigration. I think I've beaten you, actually. It is to do with unemployment, to give you a clue, but it's a specific type of unemployment. So Ethan says people taking job seeking allowance. It's not, but it's very, very close. Joe Norville, one of our great contributors, said claimant count. No. JT Galaxy says underemployment. No. Will says voluntary unemployment. No. I think I've beaten you. It's a specific type of unemployment affecting a specific group of people. And that's why I've deliberately chosen it, because it's kind of in the news at the moment. So this type of unemployment affects a specific group of people, not necessarily a cause of unemployment. And Ben Gom has the right answer. It's coming in on the screen. That is, in fact, the youth unemployment rate in the UK. Now, unemployment in the UK is 4.4% at the moment, adult unemployment. Youth unemployment is now 15% as you go into your exams, more than 3 times the rate of overall unemployment. And it's rising, as you can see. Since we came out of the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, it's gone up to 15%. Worth knowing. Jim Starr talks about NEETs. That's a similar measure, but it's not quite that. It's youth unemployment. And youths are 16 to 24-year-olds. Chart number 2. Oh, yes, I like this one. Can you identify this chart? I'll give you a clue. It's falling. In 1995, it was 33%. In 2023, it was 22%. So what do we think? This is a long-run, important chart we're going to talk about, actually, in our session today. And Emily and Ben Gom again, very, very good, very quick. It is, in fact, trade union membership. In particular, it's called density. So just to develop Emily's point there. So trade union density is the percentage of employees that are members of a union. Could be part-time jobs, could be full-time jobs. But look at that figure. If you get a question on trade unions, less than 1 worker in 4 in the UK is a member of a trade union. Okay, it's not the 1980s anymore. It's not the 1990s. Okay, the vast majority of people in work in the UK, including the self-employed, are not members of a trade union. Keep that thought in mind. Chart number 3. Oh, yes. On the left-hand side, the number of employees in thousands. It just topped 1 million in 2023. What do we think? Shamita says part-time. It's not. In fact, there's over 8 million part-time workers in the UK now. Football fan enthusiast says number of employees in the healthcare sector, NHS employment. That is a really, really good answer. It's not quite right. We do have Joe, and I think Rafiki was I think it was Kamari. He was the first person to come in with the right answer. So let's showcase Kamari's answer. Super important bit of information to have. It is indeed the number of people on 0 hour or 0 hours contracts. And as you can see, in the last 10 years, it has shot up. Hints that we might have reached peak 0 hours, if that's such a thing. But certainly about 3% of workers are on 0 hours contracts. It's over 1 million people, most of whom are self-employed, often in the gig economy. It's quite a few people we're talking about. Zoe mentioned gig economy workers. That is true, but it's actually technically 0 hours contracts. Shall we try one more? I think I've got 4. Oh, no, we've only got 3. Okay, so let's move on to low pay in the labour market. So I've got 3 or 4 topics for you. I've tried to choose topics in our time together, which I think are really topical and relevant. Okay, let's start with low pay. On the chart here I often show is that there's the lowest paid jobs in the UK in 2023. It's the latest figures I could get. It's median work, median pay, not mean, and it's the full-time gross weekly pay before tax. Okay, so if you're earning £400 a week and working 50 weeks a year, you're earning 20,000 a year, which is well below the median. About 1 job in 6, 4.5 million people were paid below the living wage. Minimum wage is set below the living wage. But the minimum wage is going up, as you know, it's going up to £12.21 per hour in April. So here we go, moving on. Can we here's a chance for you to shine. I think the music's back in this session. Can you give me 2 macroeconomic effects for the UK of millions of people in low paid work? Have a go. Wow, this is interesting. We have an amazing group of students who come together for these sessions, and here's Shadir's point: increased fiscal deficit. Now, I love that point. I think Emmanuel made a point about tax revenue. Increased fiscal deficit since the government spending on unemployment benefits goes up. I'll come back to that point, Shadir, in a second. That is a really good link between low pay and a fiscal consequence for the government. Quite a few of you talking about low consumption. Really good stuff about the impact on AD. And actually, I think Will came in with a point about the savings ratio could well be lower. And it is, because literally millions of people and millions of families are living from paycheck to paycheck, unable to pay an unexpected bill like a car service or an extra energy bill. So there's Will's point, potentially lower savings ratio, because obviously there's a shift of income. Well, millions of people on low incomes who typically have a very high propensity to spend because they can't afford to save. Okay, a really, really good point. Some great points. I've gone for the AD consumption point, which I think a lot of people did. Adam came in with a point there. Low paid workers tend to have lower disposable incomes, which limits their ability to spend on goods and services. And then crucially, what I'd like to do in the exam is link low consumption to business revenues, profits and investment. So you can make a case for saying that low pay limits the accelerator effect. Retailers, for example, are cutting back on investment. Often they're closing stores rather than expanding because there just isn't the spending in town centres in particular. So low pay is a drag on growth through consumption. And I think a really good point that came through, was about government finances. Millions of low-paid workers in what they have a job. Okay, it's called working poverty. So these are people in work, but who are still relatively poor. And they require means-tested benefits, universal credit, housing benefits, supplementary benefits. That increases the welfare bill. And I think Emmanuel came with a really good point about tax. It was one of the early contributions in the live stream there on the window. That low wages mean you're not paying much in income tax, if at all, or national insurance. So the government's spending more on benefits but getting less in direct and indirect taxes. And there's that point, decreased tax revenue. So anybody who's linking low pay to weak growth and to fiscal consequences, that is very good analysis as an A-level student. So moving on, a quick reminder that minimum wage is going up. Now this is, again, one of those super topical issues. The minimum wage is 25 years old this year. So we've had a quarter of a century of minimum wage. So for most of the time with low inflation, the minimum wage was rising most years, but only slowly, as you can see. But the last 3 or 4 years, with the cost of living crisis, it's gone up 3 or 4 times. The latest rise is 6.7% to £12.21 from the 3rd of April. That's a big topic to keep ahead of. Well done, everybody. Moving on. Unions. Let's look at unions. And again, the number of unions is going down. As of last year, there were just 128 unions left. Only 23% of people in paid jobs are members of a union. And on the chart, I've just shown you the big ones. It's good to know who the main unions are. So Unison is basically public services. Unite, GMB, the General Municipal Boilermakers Union, the nurses, the teachers' unions, the shop workers, etc. I mean, there's a lot of very small unions, but those are the big ones. But unions are not as significant as they once were. But let's think about unions, because questions do come up. So here's a question for you. And again, I want you to be specific here. Oftentimes when we get questions on trade unions, the answers are a little bit generic and a little bit kind of 1980s-ish. It won't happen with this group. Can you give me 2 key roles of unions in a modern labour market? Over to you. Well done, everybody. Some good answers coming through, suggesting a range of roles that unions play. It's not just about wages, although it's obviously important. So stop the stagnation of wages relative to living costs. YouTube hyper ed. Yeah. So in other words, real wage resistance, sticky wages in the Keynesian sense, prevent nominal wages, real wages falling. Shamita, thank you. To counteract the monopsony power of firms. That is where we're going to the next level. Okay. Because those of you AQA, for example, you might need to use a monopsony diagram where the monopsonist, the likes of Amazon or whatever it is, Ocado, they can use their monopsony power to drive wages lower than otherwise be the case. Our great contributor today, a football fan enthusiast, wage efficiency theory or higher wage, higher MOP, especially in a monopsony. There is a monopsony diagram, which we won't do today. I do have a video on it, of course, which shows if you have a union negotiated wage, you end up with higher pay and higher employment. Okay, that sounds like A-star level. It is, because it's a nice bit of interplay between, on the one hand, the union, which is a kind of supplying labour, collective bargaining, and the monopsony, which is the buyer of labour. So you have a sort of a classic bit of game theory there. Can I suggest a couple of points? Yeah, I think I'd really be looking for collective bargaining. That's the phrase I'd be using. Negotiating with employers on behalf of workers. I could actually improve this answer to secure better real wages, working conditions, and other benefits. And crucial, I think, in today's modern labour market, it's basically trying to be a counterbalance, a counterweight, if you like, to unfair things like unpaid overtime or exploitative employment contracts. The problem is that many people working in those insecure jobs, sometimes called the precariat, people working in precarious jobs, they're not members of a union. They are the ununionized part of the labour market. And car workers might be members of a union, but people working as, whatever, delivery drivers for Deliveroo, they're not nearly always members of a union. And the other key thing is workplace disputes, discrimination claims, unfair dismissals, health and safety. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, excellent contribution. Football, exactly. Outstanding today. By the way, a friend of mine was once sacked from an amusement arcade, totally without reason, and he successfully sued for funfair dismissal using his union. Now, the next bit is economics. Can you give me, and this is important, okay? So you might get a question saying, assess the factors that influence how much bargaining power unions have. Have a go on this one, please. Yeah, Ethan makes a point there, which we've showcased on the screen, that the majority of teachers are members of a union. So they have, in a sense, of collective bargaining power. Those teacher strikes are fairly rare. They're often linked to school closures or issues to do with pensions. I think Adam and Emmanuel both made the point, which I really like, by the way, which I haven't included in my answer. I wanted to emphasize it. The power of unions often depends on where we are in the economic cycle. So the growth rate of the economy, the profitability of businesses, the level of unemployment. I mean, that is a really, really good point. Typically, when labour is in short supply and high demand, then unions have more bargaining power. In a recession, that bargaining power often disappears into the ether. There's Dan's point. Dan's contributing superbly across both sessions today. The impact that strike has on the economy. Train drivers striking. Oh, Dan has put in a little pun there. Pun intended, derails the economy. Now, Dan, that's a great answer. In particular, a strike by unions could be the platform, if you like, for heading pay higher in the right direction. Your pun was better than mine. Interestingly, Dan, I want to bring a bit of game theory there. If the union has credible threat power in game theory terms, because the game theory is a negotiation between two parties, isn't it? So that ability to exercise credible threat power is important. Yeah, and the love for Dan's puns is absolutely flowing in. Well done, Dan. Maybe Dan can throw in some more puns before we finish. I've gone for density and employment laws. Quite a few mentioned the law and politics, political parties. Keep that thought in mind. Any question on unions, everybody, that's your application for the essay. Less than one worker in four is a member of a union. In some industries, it's less than 5%. Things like farming. Retail is about 10%. So if you have relatively few workers in a union, they just don't have the bargaining power, especially if you have a monopoly. Which is why the whole debate about whether Amazon will allow unions or whether Ford or General Motors will allow unions in US car plants is so important. And obviously employment laws. So under Thatcher, the trade union laws came through, anti-strike legislation. And critically, can we link here your labour markets to your globalization, to your macroeconomics? Increasingly, of course, we have large multinational corporations, the threat of outsourcing to bypass union influence. Companies might set up in countries where union laws are perhaps less or less, unions are less powerful. Who knows? But I mean, some great answers from you. And I think Emmanuel and Adam's point about the cycle was something I should have thought of because it was such a good point. So a bit of work there on unions. Let's now move on to, we've got two more topics in our time together. Let's spend 5 minutes on economic inactivity. Again, a lot of people are revising unemployment, fine, but inactivity is on the specification. As of December, the last time I looked, just under 10 million people of working age were not active in the labour market. They don't have a job and they're not looking for work. That's 21.5% of the labour market, the population. And look at the chart, that's gone up quite a bit since 2018. We had a decade of progress, but it has gone up. So more than one person in five of working age is not active. It is clearly an issue. So over to you. Outstanding answers tonight. Can you give me two possible causes of that rise in economic inactivity? Let's start the clock. Yeah, interesting. Some good answers coming through. Some of you focusing on demography. The aging population could be a factor. although this is actually inactivity amongst people of working age. So we're looking at the percentage of those people of working age and whether or not, and Jasmine talks about decreasing the standard of healthcare. Well, that is something that's relevant, Jasmine. I'll come to that in a second or two. Sam Petrie's gone for poor infrastructure and geographical mobility. Yes, I think there are significant barriers to people looking for work, being able to work. They can't afford the bus fare or whatever it is. There's no affordable housing or transport, and that can cause long-term unemployment. Sanchar or Sanch talks about skills gap. Yes, particularly amongst the long-term unemployed, Sanch. So there may be an atrophication of skills. Many people, especially when we leave the work carefully, they do, and that's a really important point. Okay, we'll come back to that again. That is a really important point. Economic inactivity has many causes, hence you need more than one policy. I've gone for health and disability. Look, the evidence is clear. Okay, there are millions of people on disability benefits. Many people, including myself, have long-term health conditions. We know there's an epidemic of mental health issues, particularly amongst the young. There's been a big rise, over 500,000 more people aged over 50 who are inactive due to long-term sickness. Some of that linked to long COVID. So there's been a whole series of, clearly the crisis in the health service and other related issues, a better awareness of and understanding of mental health issues is causing a lot of economic inactivity. And those people who say it's not the case really need to get out more. And then the other big issue is caring. The data is quite strong. A significant percentage of people are sometimes called the sandwich generation. They're looking after young families. So can they afford childcare, for example? And they're also looking after or caring for elderly relatives or people who have suffered trauma at earlier stages of life. And of course, women are more likely than men to be inactive because of the responsibilities of raising a family. What I would say in response to some of the answers is just be slightly cautious and say it's benefits, okay? Because actually a lot of people are inactive and they don't claim benefits, okay? That's just the way it is. They're full-time students, for example, or they've early retired, okay? The vast majority of people are inactive. They want to work, but there's a barrier to stopping them working. Yeah, a couple of points. Jim's posting in the live chat. Do we make these PowerPoints available for each session? Yes. And what I'll do, as you always create a little blog entry. It'll be available tomorrow if you want your daily blog where you can download a PowerPoint. And the daily live streams happen over Easter. So as soon as we finish Grade Booster, I'll be doing a daily live stream. It's amazing. I really enjoy those daily live streams where we come together one topic a day for half an hour. Let's think about policy. Our next question. Okay, so given we know that 21% of people in this country of working age are inactive, over to you. Can you think of policies that might be effective in reducing inactivity? Try and make it as specific as possible, please. Yep. I'm trying to keep it on the live chat and where the answers are flowing in, and Jim in the production room is finding some great answers. Anna I don't know how Anna created such a great answer in a minute. Maybe less spending on benefits, increased incentive to work. Perhaps. The evidence, by the way, Anna, is that doesn't work. But minimum wage going up. Yeah, okay. Some good stuff there. There's quite some good points about welfare reforms. Look, we've had 25, 30 years of welfare reform, okay? And the economic activity is still 21%. Where he talks about investing in the NHS, mental health services. Yeah, and quite a few people talking about that and also talking about maybe hybrid working, giving people more flexibility in terms of part-time work, working from home. Yeah, Sammy Petri, rezoning schemes, increasing housing near train stations. So significant progress in terms of affordable housing linked to transport hubs. No one policy on its own will ever be enough. Here's a great evaluation point for you. To be effective, we need a combination of policies addressing both short-term and long-term dynamics. I've gone for childcare and pension reform because I'm just boring. Okay, but I think increasing access to free or subsidised childcare, tax-free childcare, would help parents. Flexible working, that kind of thing. The issue there is, and we now have tax-free childcare in the UK for young children up to the age of 5, I think. But the problem is that there has been a hemorrhaging, a brain drain of people wanting to work in the childcare sector because people are working in other industries, supermarkets, for example. And also that a lot of childcare businesses have gone bust. They can't afford to pay national insurance, pensions, minimum wage. It's a low margin industry, but we clearly have to make more progress there. And on the other side, a lot of people are retiring early or leaving the labour force. So providing incentives for older workers to gain new skills, which people mentioned, or adjusting pensions policies. Let me just give a quick example of that. Often, I know of 2 people. One is a headmaster who retired early because financially it wasn't worth his while carrying on, and a very skilled eye surgeon at a major hospital who had to retire early because had he carried on earning, he would have been over the pensions limit. You start paying a lot of tax on your pension. So perhaps making pension reform so that people have an incentive to carry on working into the late 50s and beyond. Now, you might say this is all a bit detailed, but actually this is A-level, okay? The answers that were coming through were excellent. They were really good, okay? Try to make your answers as specific as possible to address an issue. So JT's point about transport investment and affordable housing, that is very specific and makes a big difference. Will says, has the rise in retirement age contributed to the rise in economic inactivity? Possibly. People are deciding they're not going to work to 62 or 67. So they retire and hopefully then try and find some work, hopefully. There was a question that came to me before that, actually, Jim, on the screen. I missed it. I was thinking about Will's point. Could you wish my economics teacher a happy birthday? His name is Mr. Burke. Well, I think we all wish Mr. Burke a happy birthday. It's always good to have economics teachers, so we celebrate and we share the love. Happy birthday, Mr. Burke. Hope you had a great day and an even better night if you're going out for a meal. And in fact, if you look at the live stream, everybody is sharing the love with lots of happy birthday wishes. I won't do any singing because my band days are long behind me. Here's our last topic for tonight. Now, I've chosen again something which you might think is a little bit left field, Jeff, but actually, you know what? Sometimes exam questions are left field. Let's talk about students, not UK students, but international students in the UK. 2 years ago, 800,000 students in UK universities. 100,000 from the EU, that's down. 650,000 from outside the EU. 1/4 of the total student population in the UK at universities now is from overseas. The UK is second in terms of that, well behind the States, but Canada and the EU catching up, particularly offering taught courses in English, both face-to-face and online. Now, the UK government, of course, we left the European Union now, so they brought in a visa scheme, which and how long students can stay depends on the course and also their previous studies. Okay, keep that thought in mind. Here we go. Here's a data chart, just in case the daily response question showing the big leap. Obviously, the pandemic brought it down because travel was restricted, but significant numbers of study visas granted in the UK. That's the context. A couple of questions for you. Can you either give me a short and or a long-term benefit for the UK economy of overseas students coming to the UK? Have a go. It's our penultimate question. So think about the consequences this time. Can you give a short-term benefit and a long-term benefit of overseas students coming to the UK? Yeah, some good answers, everybody. Again, I'm just throwing with you. Hopefully, these little case studies are a good way of revising. I throw you a little case study. You only have a minute or two to think about it, and then we're really testing. Can you come up with some common sense economics? Emmanuel talks about potentially lower domestic school fees. International students pay a lot more. Emmanuel, a good example of price discrimination. So, in theory, international students are essentially cross-subsidising domestic students. Not always, depends how the money is used, but that's a good point to make. Johnny Anderson, I'll come back to Johnny in a second. A lot of people talk about injections of the circular flow, and Johnny's point is about trade, current account deficit, because of course, education is an export. It's a service export. So you can make a case for saying this helps our balance of payments. That'd be a really good point to make. Callum, third degree discrimination, absolutely right. And Emily's point, long term, a nice long term point. If they say they work, evaluation, huge boost to the size of the skilled working age population, and of course the fiscal dividend for the government. Yeah, a lot depends on attracting those PhD students who can then commercialise their research going forward. I mean, I'm a big fan of immigration, but I think some of the most important entrepreneurs of our age are second or third generation immigrants, many of whom came here initially to study in the UK. I've gone for higher education revenue. So clearly, students overseas pay more higher tuition fees, and universities rely on those fees to fund research, infrastructure, and faculty salaries. I'm involved with a little bit with a university in the northeast of England that's been heavily reliant on overseas students. Now, those numbers have fallen in the last couple of years, and the consequences are quite severe. And trading jobs. Many international students, especially in STEM and business fields, remain in the UK. They could be entrepreneurs, they could be engineers, data scientists. So they help reduce the labour shortages. And it's a key export. Education is one of Britain's biggest exports, as was pointed out. Last question for me. That's the benefits. Let's evaluate to finish with today. Can you give me, and take a moment on this, can you give me some drawbacks, some downsides to high rates of inward migration? Over to you. There's Callum's point about, just quickly go back to Callum and come back to Elliot, if we can. So Callum's point, I think, was about, impact on the cost of rented accommodation. There's almost like a crowding out effect at work here, that there's been a surge in investment in student accommodation to meet the growing number of overseas students, but a commensurate, money can only go really one way, a commensurate fall in building for other people. So there's a bit of crowding out there. And I like the fact that Callum talks about supernormal profits. And Elliot's point, pressure on public services, transport, healthcare, and housing, built environment. Clearly, the economic geographers would have a field day here. Sanch says, does not encourage universities to reform as they can rely on international students. Yeah, there's a hint of that. That certain universities have grown fat financially on the sheer weight of international numbers, because of course they can charge the top dollar for those courses, and when that money runs out, and it runs out pretty quickly, as we saw during the pandemic, you end up with a much higher cost base, and suddenly your revenues fall. I think Callum talked about a brain drain effect of the people studying in the UK and leaving. Okay, they're footloose in that sense, which is obviously the case. Okay, Bino 2 talks about students may leave the UK after they're studying. Okay, yes, although you can make a case that a brain drain for the UK is a brain gain for the recipient country. Those students go back to the, I don't know, for the sake of argument, they go back to India or China or whatever it is. Okay. Yeah, so I've gone for pressure on public services. So there's no question that the private rental costs have gone up because of the very high demand for student housing. And I think there's a risk of over specialisation here, over reliance on tuition fees from overseas students. If you do that, and the UK university sector has become very reliant, 26% of students, it does make you vulnerable to policy changes, including visa changes, global economic downturns, as we're seeing, geopolitics, and pandemics. The university sector in the UK is really struggling at the moment. The upside is that as international students go down, there should be more places available for UK-based students, but they don't bring in as much revenue. So budgets come under pressure, which they are at the moment. Wow, fantastic. Well, I hope you found that was a useful session. We just chose 3 or 4 topics. I think we talked about unions, economic inactivity, student visas, and low pay. We just chose 4 topics. Now, here's Jim. Jim is saying tonight's contributor of the day is, so they've got 10, 15 seconds, plenty of time. Who do you think made the best contribution other than Dan's outstanding banter, A-star punnery? Who do we think made the best contribution? So Ben Gobb says football fan or Oscar. Fran says Fran. It's always good to, you've got to look after yourself, Fran. Mr. Burke gets a mention there from Oscar. Callum. Elliot's joined Callum's fan club. And Ben Gobb says Oscar is a generational talent. Now, the word legend is often overused, but to be called a generational talent is really something. It looks as if Football Fan has won the, and I can agree with that. Interestingly, by the way, this is our last session before Grey Booster. We're going to do Grey Booster for a few weeks, but then once we're back, early April, we have our daily revision sessions, and I'll tell you what, they are so much fun. But we're really in the exam game when we turn into April. Jeff, will you be at the Tutor Do meetup for economics? I'll be there the whole week in London. I wouldn't miss it for the world. It's one of the great weeks in world economics. So I'm super excited to be there. And we often meet a lot of students, and we'll bring some merch down with us as well. There we go. Here's a quick reminder that we are on Grey Booster from next week. If you want a ticket, go to tutor2.net and just search for live events and different subjects. We've added biology to our list of subjects this year. We're very excited about that. Geography, politics, business psychology, sociology, law, and of course economics. Huge thanks to everybody for contributing today. We've done 2 sessions. We've done environmental economics. We've done labour market today. The answers have been absolutely fantastic. And keep going with revision. Every hour you put in the bank now will be worth it when we get through Easter and into the exam season. So well done on that. Thank you for joining in. Stay safe, stay happy, stay curious, and we'll see you soon.